Coming up on Tech News today, Ron Richards joins. We talk about Apple Watch getting some cellular capabilities. Google set to take on Snapchat Discover with Stamp. LinkedIn gets some Tinder-like features. And The Skinny on the Dark Tower film in theaters now. All that and more coming up next on Tech News Today.
This is Twit. Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by CashFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Tech News Today, episode 1825, recorded Friday, August 4th, 2017. This episode of Tech News Today is brought to you by Grasshopper. Stay connected and run your business from your mobile phone with Grasshopper. To save $50 on your order, visit trygrasshopper.com/twit. Hello and welcome to Tech News Today. This is the show where we talk about some of the biggest tech news stories with people who are passionate about technology. I'm Jason Howell. One person that's not passionate about technology is Megan Maroney because she's not here today. She's probably still passionate about technology, just not here talking about it. But we have Ron Richards returning to the show to fill the void.
I'm passionate about technology.
I can tell. You've got passion written all over your face.
And I know for a fact that Megan is too, so let's not sell her too short. But yes, it's good. It's good to be back. I always love talking about technology with you, Jason.
Yeah, it's fun to have you on here because we're so used to doing the Android show, all about Android, and it's nice to break out of that box. Although I always like to throw a little bit of that into here because it's fun to also return to that, to it from time to time. But we're not going to have that in the top news. Top story today, Bloomberg's Mark Gurman and Ian King have sources that say Apple is planning to release a new version of the Apple Watch this year with cellular connectivity capabilities, untethering it from the connected iOS device of your choice, be it iPhone or whatever. The Apple Watch Series 3 is expected to be showcased along with Apple's big iPhone announcement sometime this fall. It's going to be a really, really big announcement. Everybody knows this coming up to this. So this would be in addition to all of the other big news surrounding the 10th anniversary iPhone edition. And yeah, I feel like we've seen this before, haven't we, Ron?
Oh, we have. We've definitely. I know this is second verse, same as the first.
Yeah.
But I'm not surprised by this because it's the next logical step. There are people who might want the Apple Watch but don't have an iPhone, and this would allow them to do that.
Yeah, I mean, do you think that many people are going to be getting the Apple Watch with that don't already have an iPhone? Like, I feel like.
I mean, you'd be surprised. I mean, depending on what the price point of this is going to be, but I got to imagine it's half the price, at least half the price of an iPhone. Maybe. Well, no, the Apple Watch is pretty expensive anyway. I'm thinking more Android Wear prices.
Right.
But I just feel like this opens the door to people who want the Apple Watch but are on a Android phone for whatever reason. They want, there's always people who want best of both worlds. I don't think it's going to move the needle. It hasn't moved the needle on Android sales. I think while the Apple Watch has been one of the products that Apple has that has been growing in sales, I don't think it's tearing the roof off the Apple stores. It has shown good growth and they're spinning it to be a success, but I don't think it's like a runaway hit. Everyone needs to have one yet.
Yeah, Tim Cook on the latest earnings call said that the Apple Watch grew 50% year over year, but you don't really have any actual numbers. Like they haven't got to the point to where they're saying this is how much we're selling, and it's just kind of how is it doing performance-wise, not necessarily what are the figures, what are the sales figures. And I think if it was doing amazingly, they'd be sharing that because they do that with the iPhone. They do that with their other product categories, but they're not with the watches. And I think that kind of echoes just the general kind of, I don't know, cooling off of the wearable market outside of things like fitness and smaller bands and stuff.
I was just gonna say, yeah, I mean, fitness and wearables and like Fitbits and things like that are the only area of any sort of activity that people actually want. And it seems to me like the Apple Watch, as well as Android Wear, whether it's from Tag Heuer or from Fossil or whatever, they're more luxury devices at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you can, by the way, with the current Apple Watch, you can already take calls. It's all done via Bluetooth. It kind of uses the Apple Watch as the extension, kind of like your Bluetooth headset, but it happens to be on your wrist. So though this news doesn't necessarily specifically say that cellular capabilities means phone calls from your watch without your phone, one could probably assume, but I don't think that's the end game. I don't think that's the reason that you do this. I think the reason you do this is because you want that data streaming through to your wrist. Maybe you go for a run and you want to be able to stream music on the run or whatever, and not have to have the phone in your pocket to tether in order to pull that off.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised, but I can't imagine it's going to sell like crazy. We'll see. I mean, it's a nice thing to announce. You know, it's cool technology. It's like, oh wow, you don't need the phone anymore. Yeah. But yeah, I'm not surprised, but I don't think it's going to be a earth shaker.
Yeah, it's the obvious next step for the Apple Watch, and this would be the third revision or the third version of it. So how do you set it apart? Well, you fill in this gap. It's almost like they plan this in advance, maybe. Like I feel like a lot of times OEMs do that. They probably, you know, it's possible that Apple could have come out of the gate with some of these features, but you hold it off because it's nice to hold it and have something for the future.
You need to have some obsolescence path, some upgrade path, right?
Yeah,
so
right.
So
some reason to keep people coming back for more.
Yep.
Google has plans to take its AMP mobile web pages and give them a little extra juice, similar to what Snapchat's doing with the Discover feature. Google's calling the project STAMP. The ST stands for Stories, and then AMP, of course, stands for Accelerated Mobile Pages. So in this, they're looking for publishers to be involved with the project. Of course, those potential partners would create a slides-based story around their content that users would then swipe through, you know, text, photos, video, all embedded within. We've seen the whole stories thing in a number of services. Everybody's copying Snapchat and all the wonderful things Snapchat has done, so now everybody has them. Google is obviously taking it one step further, though, and embedding this into the search feature. It could also hit other products that it has, but the fact that something like this would hit search puts Google, I think, at a very serious advantage in this aspect.
Well, yeah, it just speaks to the importance of the mobile experience, and and Snapchat really has. I played with Snapchat. I'm not an active Snapchat user, but their stories function for brands have been an interesting way to consume content. And Google's been working with the AMP platform so much to take, articles from newspapers and other media sites to make them more mobile friendly. And, as much as I hate, the joke that everybody, we're adding stories to all of our applications, soon we're going to have Excel stories and Slack stories and things like that. But, as Google looks for ways to make the search experience on mobile that much more tappable, this actually seemed at first I read this and I was like, this doesn't make any sense. But as I thought about it, I'm like, actually, this could be an interesting route to take.
Yeah, especially if you've played much with the AMP articles that appear on mobile, and especially if you can dive into an AMP carousel that you happen to get on your search page. It's all done in swiping. It actually very closely mimics what you've seen with some of these other stories. So from that regard, it's almost like the UI is already created, the experience is already created. It makes sense. Then it's just a matter of convincing publishers to create specifically for these different delivery mechanisms, and people are creating for Snapchat Discover, and I think does Facebook have their own stories, or maybe that's
they do. Well, Facebook
Instagram
has stories. Instagram added stories,
right?
And then Facebook added stories to the mobile app, and now the rumor is that Facebook is going to add stories to the web app, the web interface,
right? Because
so many people love them. I don't care for them, but that's fine. I just hate the story. That's a whole nother topic, by the way, because the stories content, it's ephemeral, it's temporary, it goes away after 24 hours. I like Instagram, I like Facebook because there's like a log and things, you can go back and see them.
Yeah.
But taking this approach to search results and to news is really interesting, I think. And as long as that stuff, as the ephemeral aspect isn't there, if it's just a way of giving you a swipeable interface to consume news and articles on a mobile device, I'm interested.
Yeah, and I didn't see anything that said one way or another whether it would be ephemeral or not. I'm guessing that it would have more longevity, that it wouldn't be on the ephemeral tack. Only because it is more of like a publisher-created content news sort of thing. But I could be completely wrong. But I think the challenge is convincing publishers that they should create, because I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in all of these situations, you're following a very set, specific roadmap to create content for a specific platform, and it's just becoming more and more complicated for publishers, I think, because everyone, all these services have their own thing. They have their benefits. They're much faster to load. You know, that it's all vertical. It's meant for the mobile experience and all that kind of stuff. But then the onus lies on the publisher to recreate all of their content a million different ways. And at some point, I think they get tired of that if they're not seeing the returns.
Yeah, and also like doing what you need to do to make sure it works that way. I mean, like here we are in 2017, we still don't see people getting the card, the kind of the tags correctly so that links render correctly on Facebook or on Twitter or things like that. There's simple kind of things that it's so hard to play catch up with all the different tags you need to put in your code and things like that. I'm curious to see, what Google will do with publishers to help them to make it so that if they don't have the right tag in their content, then it will still work or won't work. But yeah, it's getting, I can't imagine somebody who's run a media site in the past and like keeping up with all those things in your template and things like that it's just a nightmare. So
absolutely. Well, all roads point to Tinder, or so I've heard. LinkedIn is apparently taking a page out of Tinder's book by developing a new feature to connect LinkedIn users to other users, with the goal being networking, collaboration, mentorship, and definitely not hooking up. Users first, maybe, I don't know. Users first decide which pool of users they wish to connect with, be it people in their area, from their alma mater, or within their LinkedIn network. And then a series of profiles will be presented, with the user clicking to pass or accept. And in true Tinder, in the vein of Tinder anyways, both sides would have to match in order for that discussion to take place, whatever it would happen to be about. It would only happen if both sides agreed to it, essentially, and said, hey, I want to connect with that person for whatever we're going to connect up with or for. I don't know. It's kind of confusing on LinkedIn. I think it's a weird model to apply to LinkedIn. What do you think?
I was going to say, you okay there, Jason?
Is
this blowing your mind?
It's blowing my mind a little bit. What do you think?
I mean, it's just LinkedIn doing anything to be relevant. It's just they're doing whatever they possibly can, because everybody, as of right now, all LinkedIn really is just more spam in my inbox. That's all, in my email inbox. That's all it is. I was on it recently this week, and I saw they made a lot of changes to their web interface, and they changed where things are organized and how you connect with people and things like that. So they're trying to iterate, but what more can you do? So good for them for trying to apply the Tinder model to mentoring. I think, if it helps some people, and I'm sure that there is like business guru, improvement people who will be all over this, who will want to mentor people. So if that helps them connecting people who need mentorship, that's great.
Yeah, that's true. It's just another tool.
I will never use it though. So.
Everybody's hopping on the Tinder train though. Thank you for that wonderful transition there.
Swipe right. I'm glad you swiped right. That's
yes, good. Thank you. Although you could go in reverse, the T-bar does facilitate that. But yeah, I suppose it does make sense. And Tinder as a user interface experience seems pretty straightforward for possibly this sort of thing. If it's for matching two people who have similar interests, yeah, that could be applied to the LinkedIn ecosystem and actually make a lot of sense. Spokesperson for LinkedIn does want to make sure, well, they actually think that the comparison to Tinder is misleading, they've said. They told Gizmodo that anyways. They say users who get inappropriate messages should report immediately and block the user, because LinkedIn has had its fair share of issues around sexual harassment and stuff like that as well. So you could also kind of see this tool being used in a different way potentially, but that's only because Tinder exists and we know that. Earlier this week, when Bitcoin forked to create a new cryptocurrency called Bitcoin Cash, the biggest Bitcoin exchange, Coinbase, announced that it would not be supporting it, which resulted in a mass exodus of its users, many users leaving as they moved their Bitcoins to competitors who do support the new offering. Coinbase has since updated its blog to say that it now intends to support Bitcoin Cash effective January 1st, 2018. So there's going to be a little bit of time until that happens. They say, quote, assuming no additional risks emerge during that time. Coinbase will hold on to the Bitcoin Cash that its users are owed until then, at which time they can withdraw their Bitcoin Cash. Because basically what happened in this transition, we talked about this a little bit earlier this week, but when Bitcoin forked and Bitcoin Cash came about, it was basically a one-to-one ratio. So for every Bitcoin you had, you also had a Bitcoin Cash. And, you know, that was basically being stockpiled by Coinbase because they didn't want to explore this new setup without, I guess, properly vetting it. And now, I mean, I don't know if they've properly vetted it, but they've seen a sincere, like, harsh reaction from their users saying, hey, we want this, and if we don't get it, we're leaving. So that's apparently enough for them to say, okay, we'll do it.
I really wish, I hope someone's taking notes and makes a wonderful soap opera drama built around Bitcoin. Because the drama and the emotional roller coaster that Bitcoin has become over the years is fantastic. As someone who's not involved in cryptocurrency and not involved in all this, I don't own any Bitcoin. I know a couple of people who work in blockchain and all that sort of stuff. But it just seems like it's exhausting to be in this space, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, with the uncertainty, I mean, that's what kind of throws me off is just because it's so new and because it's so easy to misunderstand. At least I feel like it's easy to misunderstand. Anytime I say that, I see people in chat that are like, it's not that complicated. For some reason it is. I've got a mental block on Bitcoin, and I wish I understood it a little bit better. But it just seems so complicated and so early. I guess what it is it's hard to see like a growing new kind of currency emerge. I don't know if I've ever actually like witnessed that and paid attention to it. And when it's happening, it's really difficult to know whether it actually makes sense, whether it's being done appropriately, and whether it's even a good idea to get involved.
I'll be honest, Bitcoin scares me a little as a user, as a person. I even get it. I've had it explained to me, and I think it's really fast. In fact, last time I was on TNT, we talked about how Bitcoin and blockchain, and not Bitcoin specifically, but blockchain and cryptocurrency could be used in music and music distribution and things like that. I definitely think the future is the blockchain, but how that pertains to currency and cryptocurrency and actual money, and that's the thing that always blows my mind, is that this actual people are making money and losing money based off these changes. And the idea that Coinbase, like if I had my Bitcoin on Coinbase and they're going to hold on to it until January, I get why, but that would drive me crazy because you want your money. Like that's the thing. It's like you don't want anyone else to kind of take it from you. So whenever actual currency is involved, that's when it gets super dicey to me. So
yeah, and I mean it's hard to fault Coinbase entirely because at least based on how they're spinning this, like I said, that part of their hesitancy was because they support a strategy of only really getting behind and supporting established, vetted cryptocurrency. This was a new cryptocurrency. There were questions going into it prior to the fork. And so, up to a week before the fork happened, they drew a line in the sand. I think now, and post forking, some of those fears haven't happened. Some of the end result of those fears hasn't happened, and so maybe that's enough for them to be like, okay, it's not as unstable. There's not a huge potential here for things to go south right away the way we thought. So we might as well open it up and make people happy. They aren't saying at what point owners or traders on Coinbase will be able to trade Bitcoin Cash on the system, but they'll get access to it starting January 1st of the Bitcoin Cash that they actually have owed to them. They can withdraw at that point. So there you go. If you're on Coinbase, I didn't know I was on Coinbase. I got this email. It's how I knew about this announcement. I got an email this morning. I was like, wait a minute, when did I sign up for Coinbase? But apparently I did. I logged in. I don't have any Bitcoin. I don't have any in there. I was like, maybe somewhere along the line.
Jason, you were a surprised Bitcoin millionaire.
Maybe maybe it's one of those things that I just forgot. Like, oh yeah, I remember. Now I remember, 5 years ago or 4 years ago, I hopped in there and bought a single Bitcoin. Now it's worth a lot of money. But no, that didn't happen. So I was a little bummed. Anyways, coming up, Sam Machkovech will tell Ron and I and you whether we should run out to see the new Dark Tower film that's in theaters. But first, before we talk about that, let's take a minute to thank the sponsor of this episode, and that is Grasshopper. Grasshopper is a virtual phone system that's designed for entrepreneurs. And Grasshopper works just like a traditional phone system, but in this case, it doesn't require any sort of hardware purchase. They have an iOS or an Android app that you can use, and callers can reach you wherever you are on your mobile phone. Grasshopper allows you to keep your existing number so you can maintain your brand. When you make your call, your client's going to see your Grasshopper caller ID instead of your personal phone number. You simply select a toll-free or a local number. You can record a custom greeting, customize that. You can add multiple extensions for your business through Grasshopper. Toll-free numbers, of course, awesome for marketing. Makes your business sound even more professional when they know they're calling a toll-free number, and then it comes to you. Isn't that nice? Set up department and employee extensions with custom call forwarding to any phone in the world. You can also get your voicemails emailed to you as audio attachments. You can, of course, send and receive SMS text messages from your business number. All sorts of functions here to make your business even better. Join the over 250,000 Grasshopper customers today. Plans start at just $12 a month. You have a 30-day money-back guarantee, so no reason not to try it out. Turn your smartphone into a business line with Grasshopper. To save $50 on your order, go to trygrasshopper.com/twit. That's trygrasshopper.com/twit. And we thank Grasshopper for their support of Tech News Today. So Stephen King's sprawling epic, The Dark Tower, is finally on the big screen, which will make a lot of people happy. But the big question is, does it do the books justice? Joining us to give his thoughts on the movie is Sam Machkovech from Ars Technica. Welcome, Sam.
Hello from the Dark Tower of Seattle, where it is like a post-apocalyptic space as of late, thanks to all the crazy wildfires that are nearby.
Wildfires, and not only that, like blistering heat. I've been seeing the news. Oh. You guys have been getting hit.
It's like, I feel like it's a few steps away from the Dark Tower. Either it's how the movie looks or its box office performance.
Oh, okay. Either way. All right. So first of all, The Dark Tower, for those who don't know, is a pretty big collection of books, 7-book collection. How much of the series itself is encompassed in this film? Is it meant to be everything, a chunk of it, the first book? How much?
It is not meant to be the entire collection. Again, The Dark Tower has spanned a lot of Stephen King's career, and in many ways it reflected his changing life. Stephen King going through a lot of weird stuff throughout his career, alcoholism being one of the bigger points, and it sort of reflected a lot of different points of his personality. This film takes some of the overlying concepts and hits a quote-unquote reset button. Not to spoil anything about the book, but that does kind of make sense for the book in terms of how the series made room for sort of out-of-nowhere re-beginnings. But the point of this is that this reflects kind of a new genesis for the idea of a Dark Tower universe. So there's a little bit of the first book, a little bit of the third book, and it focuses on only 3 of the main characters: Jake Chambers, a young boy, Roland, who's also known as the Gunslinger, and a guy named the Man in Black, who has a very unsexy name, Walter. But Man in Black is definitely a little darker. So there's a little bit of that first book and third book, but it also feels like they're going in a totally different direction for how the story starts. It definitely feels like a 80s misunderstood teen story, which none of the books really had, where you have Jake Chambers as a misunderstood preteen. He's seeing all these weird visions of a tower and children being tortured, and eventually sees a gunslinger. And everyone says he's kind of crazy and he's coping with his father's death, which is also different than in the book. Ultimately, liberties are taken so that the film can follow Jake as he discovers this Dark Tower. And I don't know if the filmmakers meant for this to kind of tap into that 80s zeitgeist renewal, which, Stephen King was certainly part of great 80s storytelling. Absolutely. But he wasn't necessarily attached to, when you think of Stranger Things, you don't immediately think of it and some of Stephen King stuff like that. But this film does have a serious Stranger Things vibe in terms of modern zeitgeist, because you ultimately follow this kid as he overcomes some of his own ghosts and demons and allies with the Gunslinger, who's an older man with similar ghosts and frustrations dealing with the death of his father.
When I do think of Stephen King and film, I think uneven. Like some Stephen King films have been really great. Some of them have been pretty awful. Where does this stand in that kind of continuum?
Kind of in the middle above, because what's interesting about this, again, not 7 books, not summing up a lot of stuff. This movie runs lean, 90 minutes. But what that they do with that 90-minute runtime, I think, is really interesting in that they focus on only a few characters. They dump some important characters from the books in order to focus on the three that I mentioned. And the acting performance on all three is really strong. The character of Jake Chambers is played by a kid whose name I'm totally blanking on, but this is one of his first major pictures. And he's got to be, I think maybe he's 15 or 16 tops, and he plays like a 12-year-old. He's phenomenal in terms of having a lot of plot on his shoulders and making it work. And he's joined by Idris Elba, who's not overwritten. I think it could have been really tempting for these guys to pack a lot of backstory and explanations. And instead, Idris Elba is not forced to do a bunch of talking it out. He acts with expressions, with nonverbal cues, with grunts, and it really works. I like that. And then Matthew McConaughey, at first, I was really annoyed and even laughed at the cheesiness of him, but he plays a very specific type of evil. He's sort of this, you don't get quite the explanation of what kind of evil force or devil he is, but he's definitely like worse than Satan is sort of the sense you get. And he preys on people's insecurities as he moves between our Earth and this alternate universe that doesn't quite, I don't quite understand what the alternate universe is, but he likes to just pop in and just whisper some messed up stuff into people's ears. And I'm not saying like cuss words. I'm saying things that are just psychologically really cutting. And I think he really nails this sort of cheesiness as a result. I like how he's played. I like that he's unapologetic about being a McConaughey. And so that was the biggest surprise for me, was that it was ultimately a watchable film, but the Dark Tower license, if they had to change names at the last minute, you might not have noticed.
Right. Are you hopeful there will be more in the series in film version?
In my review, I did say that I would like to see more, because I feel like this was a lean, toned down way to get into the film universe that could be set up to add in more characters, to add in some of Roland's darker backstory. Because again, the first Dark Tower is pretty messed up in terms of the amount of killing and weirdness that he overcomes and gets through. So I think this sets us up enough to be like, I like these three characters. I want to see more of them. The weird thing about this film, though, is that it ends really tidily. I don't need to tell you exactly how it ends, but there's enough that's really wrapped up that makes me go, were they just afraid that this wouldn't get picked up for, a sequel or something? Did they really just want to make sure people wouldn't leave mad about a cliffhanger that wasn't fulfilled? So I hope that they find a path into that. I'd like to see Idris Elba resume, because that man just slays when he gets a good piece to work with. And he does. I've seen him be bad in some movies and TV series, but this one he nails. I mean, I love the guy.
Awesome.
Well, so early reports is that it did about 1.7 million in the box office on last night on Thursday, which has a tracking to do probably 17 to 18 million this weekend, which isn't a major release, in comparison to other summer blockbusters. So,
yeah. But it doesn't have a lot of competition. I was looking at similar reports where they're saying this is a really weak. It may be number one. Like, this is a really weak box office, and if that means you need to escape with air conditioning and a movie theater, and you already saw Dunkirk, it's not a bad way to go. It's not a bad 90 minutes. Don't take kids necessarily. There's not a lot of blood and gore, but this is definitely just an inch away from R in terms of the amount of bullets that are plopped into other humans.
So this week, I don't know if you've heard, we haven't talked about it on the show, but some of you may have heard HBO encountered a huge hack. Around 1.5 terabytes of data was snagged in the process. And now much of that, as you would expect, is appearing online. What is the result of this, Sam? And no spoilers, obviously, because it involves Game of Thrones.
Well, the thing that was not quite confirmed until yesterday, because there was information about a leak and about a lot of data, but it's confirmed that HBO has had an episode of Game of Thrones leak before it aired. And, at first it was a script, and then it was, the video of the. Yeah, I am not a giant Game of Thrones fan. Therefore, I have not watched it because I don't want to be that jerk who's not, it's bad enough when you go to a party these days and say, I'm not that into Game of Thrones. But if you double down and be like, not only do I not care about it, I'm going to ruin it for you. Yeah, you don't get invited to parties. But there is definitely enough there where if you want to jump ahead to find out more in a world in which we no longer have George R.R. Martin laying it out for you, it is out there. And what's interesting is HBO changed all of its pre-release distribution of episodes because of leaks in prior seasons. HBO really clamped down. It is impossible to get a review copy of an episode of Game of Thrones. And in fact, many of the other series like Westworld, normally you'd be able to go to their screening room and watch stuff in advance, and it would have like a watermark of your name on the screen. And they're convinced that even that's not good enough for Game of Thrones in terms of locking that down and making sure everyone has to watch day of. So once again, HBO fail. HBO InfoSec fail.
Well, what's interesting is that the hack is unrelated to the episode leak, and that the fact that the episode leaked from a distribution partner, not from the infrastructure hack that happened earlier this week, is just like double whammy for them. Like, they had the problem with the leak where the script leaked through that, but the actual video came through distribution channels. So it's just like they just can't get a break.
Right.
So,
Yeah, that's what happens when you have to do all this green screenery in different studios in different countries, trying to reduce the cost. I mean, this is the cost of doing business in a global market where something like an internet leak, the weakest chain in that global distribution network is going to be really happy to take, either that bit of internet points or even a little bit of cash in order to dump that sort of information out there for everyone.
Especially,
the leak came from their distribution partner, Star India, and apparently the Star India logo is watermarked on the video. So if you're watching the leaked episode and you see the Star India logo on it, that's where the source came from. So.
Yeah, I mean, it also shows kind of the complexity, and this is by no means a recent problem. This has been a problem for quite a few years now, just around the fact that, I mean, these studios, like when you're talking 1.5 terabytes of data, and if you can assume that much of that is video content, I mean, that's an insane amount. That's a huge library of potentially unreleased content. But in the days before the internet, it would be stacks of DVDs or videotapes or whatever, and it would be I would imagine it would be a lot harder to have that much impact on someone stealing some content. In this case, it's like, here, have everything, because we had it all in a folder, and it's really easy to transfer 1.5 terabytes of data and basically, be in possession of all of your future releases.
Well, there's two ways to look at that, which is that, first off, that 1.5 terabytes, that's got to be a dream for Fark or Reddit or any of these forums where people take like dissected bits of content and Photoshop it or green screen it and turn it into some other crazy thing. But that 1.5 terabytes of data, you only need about 50K of data in order to really cause chaos, because there is a lot of private contact information and executive information that is part of this leak. And that little bit of 50, 100K is going to possibly do a lot more damage than a single episode leak. That's the thing about that giant haystack of data, is that those needles are the ones that prick the most.
Yeah. I mean, we're still seeing the results of the Sony hack from however long ago that was. All the bits of information that came out from that. Yeah, so it's crazy. So.
When was that? That was. Yeah,
that was a year. That was about a year and a half ago, I think.
Sony Pictures Inside the Hack of the Century, Part 1, 2015. So yeah, that was a while ago. 2014, actually.
Oh, geez.
I want Jason to start a YouTube channel that's just him quietly reading headlines and tech articles from a year or two ago. That almost put me to a really nice ASMR nap right there. Sony Pictures had a
an exclusive look at Sony.
Just start crinkling some marshmallow bags at the time.
Anytime I go on a Google search, I'll open up a stream and you guys can follow along with just my voice. Finally, you told me, Sam, that you really wanted some time to talk about a new game you've been playing called Fidel Dungeon Rescue. So then, talk.
Anyone can see this face right here who's watching the web feed. I love this game. It is called Fidel Dungeon Rescue. It is not a Fidel Castro simulator. It is a puzzle game in which you are a little dog trying to get through a dungeon and find your master. Seems simple enough where you're walking around this little puzzle. You can't retrace your steps because you have a leash. So wherever you walk, you cannot, step over that line, which is similar to a puzzle game that I really liked called The Witness that came out early last year. The difference here is that these puzzle rooms are randomly generated, and you have to learn how to get through these rooms by dying. You go through and a session can last, 7-8 minutes if you're any good, a lot shorter if you're not. But after about 4 or 5 deaths, you learn, oh, I have to manage a health bar. Because if my dog, as he walks around, eats certain kinds of creatures that are in these rooms, he loses some health. Oh, but there's some health to pick up. Okay, so I'm going to manage my health. Oh, but if I eat these certain animals in a different way, that's it makes me live or die sooner or later. Oh, and then there's experience points. And I learn, oh, if I eat the right things in the right order, then I get even more health. And then I can actually get through further puzzle rooms, which to me is like mastering random Tetris blocks times 1,000. It's not the same as Tetris by any stretch, but it has that same appeal for me. And what you look at and see looking like one of these randomly generated dungeon crawling games, and there are a lot of these, especially in computer gaming these days, what I see is a really interesting evolution of the Tetris-style random block game, which has kind of died down. You don't see Tetris clones like you used to in the late 80s and early 90s. I am smitten with this game. I have not had my brain tickled and played with like in a puzzle game like this for years. I love it. It's $9. In fact, I think it's less thanks to a Steam sale, and it's on PC and Mac. And I really cannot emphasize enough. It looks cute. It appeals very quickly, and the amount of puzzly goodness pops immediately. As long as you're willing to die a few times to sort of learn the ropes, it doesn't take long to really snap into something. I just love this game. I cannot stress enough how this is almost certainly going to be in my top 10 end of the year. And I don't think many people are really aware of it because it isn't the same as some of the stuff that's really hot. It's not like a twitchy game. It's not a PUBG, PlayerUnknown's Battleground kind of epic adventure. It's you by yourself mastering a system and having a cute little dog with a dedicated bark button. I mean, come on, give me the bark button any day of the week.
Does the bark button actually have any like function, or is it just fun to press and hear the bark?
At first, it just barks, but maybe it does something.
Okay, over time. It looks like a very mobile-capable game. Any chance you think that this will make the jump to mobile at some point? Also, it's really not that expensive.
Yeah, what's interesting is a lot of people are asking that. But this is a whole conversation about game economics that I find fascinating, which is that a $9 game on computer, your Steam or for Windows or Mac, people go, oh, that's affordable, that's cheap, that's easy. You price something for $9 on a phone, people resist and freak out. Like, $9 for an app? Get out. And they'll, pay 99 cents for something that steals their identity and information anyway. Yeah. So I don't know economically if it's ever going to come to mobile at that price. This guy's just trying to use a single developer, trying to maximize. And I think it's a cost experiment, but it definitely has that kind of simple pixelated style. And actually, when you play it, it doesn't work in widescreen. It's got sort of a ratio that looks like it's kind of meant for a phone anyway. The developers have not said that they're coming to phone at any point soon, but I could see that being a thing that happens down the line. But if you need to play it on a phone in order to play it, news for you, this will work on pretty much any computer. I really encourage you to, steal a crappy old computer if you don't have one, because it is worth the theft
of the computer, not the game.
Yes. Don't steal the game. Steal the computer. That's my Ars Technica motto right there.
Right. Yeah. You can put that on a T-shirt. I like that. All right. Sam Machkovech, always awesome getting you on every Friday or almost every Friday. Thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
All right, back to the Dark Tower I go. You guys have a good weekend.
All right, ArsTechnica.com and @SamRed on Twitter. Take care, Sam.
See ya.
All right, feedback time. Bob Davies wrote into TNT at twit.tv about lives saved in the transition towards autonomous vehicles. Bob says, the saving of lives by going to autonomous cars is vastly overrated because we don't take into account unintended consequences. Let's say we save 30,000 lives. How do we replace the organ donors we just saved or eliminated? The average organ donor can save 2.5 recipients, but can be as high as 6. Heart, lungs, 2 kidneys, 2 bisected liver, skin for severe burn victims, bone marrow. So we, not the car's programming, just decided whose life is more important to save. This doesn't take into account life improvement grafts, transplants of cornea, cartilage, tendons, bone. Now the question is whose life is more important, car passengers or waiting organ recipients. Keep in mind, a donor generally has to be the victim of a traumatic death, not disease or natural causes. If you do the math, 10,000 donors eliminated times 2.5 to 6 organ recipients is 25 to 60,000 lives, not counting the life improvement transplants that could add another 20,000 lives or more. Doesn't seem like a very good trade. This is a perspective I had never considered in the algebra that surrounds autonomous vehicles, how they're programmed to save lives, which is another example of this, right? It's like, how do you tell the computer whose life is more important? In this case, how do we determine whose life is more important? The people who are getting the organ donor are the recipients of organs that come from donors as a result of an accident, or saving people's lives in the accident themselves? What do you think, Ron?
I literally cannot fathom that at all. Like the looking at it from that angle is crazy. But that's the thing, is that's the impact that infrastructure and transportation and travel has on this world.
Yeah.
It's like we hate to think that we want to avoid a car wreck at all costs, but probably car wrecks drive organ donors, which is crazy to think about, but that's true. And so I can't even fathom this. This is so beyond my arena.
I mean, I guess I could get myself into trouble, because as I think about this, like, I think if you have the ability to prevent an accident or to prevent a death of some sort, then you take that. Even though there
Absolutely.
is a large amount of people who are helped on the other side of that when an accident does happen, I don't think that's a reason that you allow accidents to happen. You know what I mean? Because
I agree. I agree. I mean, the thing is that there's intended consequence and unintended consequence, and we've built systems around both of them. And as the world evolves, though, the scale between intended consequences and unintended consequences and how we manage them change. I mean, you think about life longevity. People did not live nearly as long as they live now. 100 years ago, there were no cars. There's travel by horse. People lived to be 50 at best. And I probably got those numbers wrong. Bear with me. But 100 years ago, there were cars, and 100 years ago, people did live longer than 50. But 200 years ago, let's say that.
Right.
And so, so as the world changes, these systems need to change as well too. And I think the autonomous cars is one of the biggest drivers of that change that we're going to see in our lifetime.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a complicated matter. I just hadn't really considered that way of thinking on that argument.
That's bananas.
So
bananas.
It's a different way to think about it, I think. TNT's fan of the day is TJ Bennett on Twitter, who sent us this picture of me rubbernecking on the set of TNT, saying he watches while he works. Let's just hope he gets some work done while he's watching. Show us how you watch or listen to TNT. Just record a video or take a picture of yourself or your setup. You can post that on Instagram, Google+, Twitter, or Facebook, and use the hashtag HowIWatchTNT, and we'll search for it and find it and include it on an upcoming show. Please do that. We love those. Finally, had to end on a topic near and dear to our hearts, Ron. Evan Blass, also known as EvLeaks on Twitter, released what he says is a front and back image of the smaller of the two Google Pixel phones to be announced later this year. Probably not very, very far from now. The smaller device, again, produced by HTC, just like the device that came out last year, will not have the ultra slim front and side bezels that the larger Pixel is expected to have. The larger one produced by LG, so they're kind of doing it a little bit differently. If I understand correctly, the leaks is that the smaller one's produced by HTC, the larger one produced by LG. I could be wrong on that. But it will carry HTC's squeezable side frames that will, possibly be another way of launching apps or something, similar to what HTC included in its HTC U11 flagship phone. And no, neither new Pixel device should have an analog headphone jack, though some phone case leaks that I've seen have shown a headphone jack as part of the design. So it could go either way, which is, I guess, a long way of saying we just don't know. We don't know.
We're in leak land. We're in leak territory now. As we're anticipating the announcement of both the new Pixels as well as the new iPhone, all that stuff. It's all going to come later this month, early September. We'll see what comes of it. I hate these leaks. I like being surprised. It's like avoiding spoilers on Game of Thrones or on a movie or something like that. I just don't want to see it. Yeah. But there are two things when it comes to Android phones that I've been saying for the past couple of months, is that the future is bezel-less and the future is headphone jackless. And already I got a stream of tweets from people reacting to this leak going, no headphone jack, no Pixel 2 for me. Yeah. And there's going to be a point where your headphone jack is going away, whether you like it or not. And that's just inevitable, I think.
Is the future also dual camera full?
I don't know. I did think that was interesting that dual camera wasn't in there. I'm wondering if they're doing that, if that's not including that as a way to keep the cost competitive.
Yeah.
I don't know. I definitely don't think the future is squeezable though. I think the squeezable interface is weird. But the dual camera, I don't know. I think that's curious that they left that out if these are to be believed.
Yeah, and I'll be very curious to see about the water and dust resistance. I think that was a big miss on the last one that people would really like. And if it ends up being, well, we don't have that, but we have the squeezable sides, I think that's going to make a lot of people kind of angry.
That's not a trade-off. We just assumed water resistance would come in the Pixel 2. Remember, we're like, oh, it'll be in the next one. Like, it's just an assumption. And really, Samsung's really the only one I know that's been aggressive about that. So while I'm be surprised that they don't include it, I won't be surprised because that hasn't really been standard across the majority of these flagship phones. Yeah. So I think they should because it's a great selling point. But again, it's that cost question.
Yeah, it needs to happen though. TNT records. Oh, actually, before I do this, I forgot to put this in there. Hey, Ron, thank you for joining me today.
Oh, my pleasure, Jason. When Jason calls, I come a running. So the sun is setting here in New York City, and it's been a lovely time talking about tech and Dark Tower and various things with you.
I feel like I'm full color and you're blue and white.
I am a little. And the thing is that like I'm stuck to my desk, so I can't go turn on the light. And my smart things, I turn the lamp off manually, and so I tried to turn it on and it didn't turn on.
Doesn't work. Doesn't work when you overwrite it the old-fashioned way. Yeah, exactly. Ron, it's always awesome getting you on TNT, and I really appreciate you taking the time. Where do you want people to kind of follow what you're up to right now? Yeah,
so you can go to Twitter and follow me at RonXO on Twitter, where I post about music and nonsense and fun stuff. And then, of course, if you want to check out my other podcasts, go over to ifanboy.com, where we're talking about comic books there, comic book movies and TV shows. We talked about Spider-Man and Wonder Woman and all that fun stuff. We got The Defenders coming up on Netflix, so we're going to be talking about that this month. And then also check out damnfinepodcast.com, where me and Tom Merritt are talking about Twin Peaks every week, every Sunday with special guests analyzing the new Twin Peaks show. So check that out at damnfinepodcast.com.
And what are you going to do when there's no more new Twin Peaks episodes?
Get my Sunday nights back.
So it goes on hiatus until, will there be a next one?
No, there's probably not going to be another one. I mean, we're assuming this is it. We're assuming this will be the end, but who knows? We'll see. But for now, although the listeners of Damn Fine Podcast have requested that we go back and rewatch all 18 episodes of season 3 and reanalyze them with some time, I'm gonna need a break if we do that, but but it's been a fun way to spend Sunday nights with Tom Merritt and our other guests. We've had some fun folks on there, so it's good. So
that's awesome, great work. Right on, man. Thank you again, and I think we'll see you on Tuesday. All about Android.
I'll be there. Yep.
All right. Okay, now I can do the last part of the show. TNT records live every Monday through Friday, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, 2300 UTC at twit.tv/live. You can be part of the show, of course, by emailing us at tnt@twit.tv. Leave us a short voicemail, 260-TNT-SHOW. And you can find us on Twitter at TechNewsTodayTV. You can find all the ways to subscribe to our show at twit.tv/TNT. If you want to come in and watch live, you can. Tickets at twit.tv. We actually have someone in here. Doesn't happen very often. We've got a gentleman here watching, making me feel at least a little bit more important than we normally do. So thank you for coming in. I'm at Jason Howell on Twitter. Thanks, of course, to our technical director, Kevin. Thanks to Mario for helping out in the studio. And Kevin, are you editing as well? Yeah, sure. Okay. I don't know if he's very committal at this point, but I'm going to assume that Kevin's going to edit the show. And if so, thank you. If not, whatever. And thanks to you for talking tech with us today. We'll see you all on Monday. Have a great weekend. Bye, everybody. High five, Ron. I'll just put it up there.
Bam.
Bam.